Hi there, it's Lisa Williamson here, and we are going to be looking at equine nutrition. We've got a whole bunch of PowerPoints, and this is number 1 in the series. It is Evolutionary Adaptations, and if you are wondering how this will help you in pony club testing, well, it won't. You probably will not find any questions on this topic, and likewise, if you have problems with the concept of evolution altogether, you may just want to skip forward to the next PowerPoint and start with series number 2, but I just felt this was an interesting introduction to the whole concept of equine nutrition and how we got to where we are right now. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the horse, and the horse is what is classified as a non-ruminant herbivore. There are some basic classifications of digestive systems, one being the simple stomach and the other being the complex stomach, and this is sort of a combination of both. We have a simple stomach animal that is also has ruminant capacities to it, and that is what the horse is. So what a ruminant is a hind gut fermenter. So that means that they are going to be fermenting things in the latter part of their intestinal tract. A non-ruminant is an animal that relies on enzymatic digestion via the stomach and small intestine, and there's limited degradation occurring in the large intestine. So what we have is the horse somewhere halfway between both of these. So if you picture the original horse, Eohippus, the little dog-sized little horse with 5 toes, how did it change to the horse we have now that might be standing in your barn 16 hands high, or the pony 14 hands out in your field? Well, topic that's very popular right now, climate change. And climate change happened back then there. At that time, the horses that they had at that time, Eohippus, they lived in forests and they ate a lot of the undergrowth, and they did not have to be a large animal. But then climate change occurred and a lot of the forests disappeared. Grassland became more common. The horse ended up having to move out into that area, or the animal did, and it ended up getting changes in its body as a result. Part of the changes were based on the fact that it had to stay alive. It had to stay away from predators. So there were things out there chasing it, and so that required some shifts in how it was put together. So if we're looking at brain advancement, basically brain advancement happens first in prey animals. So they need to have ears that are bigger. You think about the horse's ears, they can swivel around, they can hear very well. Their eyes are set on the side of their head. They've got a very broad range of vision to again see in front of them as well as behind them and protect themselves. Their neck got longer. It allowed them to graze the trees that they could still reach, and then they also developed a more rigid spine, which allowed them to have higher speeds and escape better. Their legs got longer, so they had this sudden telescoping of leg length, and then they made the transition from 5-toed to 3-toed, and then down to the single digit that we have today. As well, the depth of their body changed, and that made the horse even bigger yet. So the head is another thing that changed, and this is something that we look at with our nutrition today with our horses. It still impacts the horse quite a bit. Basically, they went and developed something called a hypsodont, or high crown tooth, and they also ended up developing teeth that continued growing throughout their lifetime rather, and then they had an increased number of cusps, and so the grinding surface of the molar ended up being able to chew the food, grind the food more effectively. And then the molars became a uniform series as well, so the placement of the molars was different. In the digestive tract itself, over time, they ended up evolving from an omnivore, which is an animal that ate basically anything, to a herbivore, which is an animal that ate grasses, and that's what we have today. The cecum in the horse got bigger and allowed it to digest fiber. Also, a symbiotic relationship developed with the microbes or the flora in the hindgut to aid in fermentation, and we'll be talking about that later as well. So today, what do we have? We have a horse that is a social animal. It's a herd animal that is part of the protection mechanism of the horse in the wild. It still utilizes the fight or flight response. You know, if your horse shies, it's trying to save its life and get away from that thing very quickly. And that is all part of that adaptation that it developed way back when. Biological things that have evolved, well, nowadays, we still have horses that are intended to range up to 80 kilometers a day. We don't let them because we don't have that amount of land available to us, most of us. We tend to keep them in stalls or paddocks or much smaller fields, but the horse is an animal that does need to be moving all the time, and by ranging, that also includes eating. So theoretically, the horse should be eating all the time. That is how it has been evolved, so it's constantly moving and constantly eating. So grazing and chewing continually. They're designed to be ingesting food 16 to 20 hours a day, which sounds like a lot, but that's how their digestive tract is set up. The foods that they digest are primarily forages, and they're not intended to be eating high quality forages, not a lot in the way of grains and things like that, but mainly fibrous foods, hays, lower quality foods. By lower quality, I mean lower in protein. However, what do we do with the horse today? We, like, as I said, we keep them in stalls, we keep them in paddocks, instead of letting them work long periods of time at a slower rate. We put high intensity, short duration work on our horses, and so that has made a change in the type of feeds that we give our horse today. And so it's a constant balancing act between what the horse is intended to be eating and what we have to feed the horse to make it perform the sort of unusual things that we ask the horse to do, that we want our horses to do. When we think about the horse becoming domestic, that first took place about 3,000 years ago, and that happened in West Central Asia. Grains were introduced to supplement the forage diet, and barley was actually the first grain fed. We're going to talk more about barley later. It wasn't until about 1000 BC that oats were domesticated and started to be fed to horses. In Roman times, bran was commonly fed to horses. Corn hasn't been fed to horses, or first was fed to horses about 400 years ago. So it's a fairly new crop for horses to consume. Things like commercially mixed and prepared grains first appeared just over 100 years ago. Pellets have only been around since about the 1960s. And since then, there have been even more advancements. There are things like how to harvest forages that are less weather dependent, and then also different sorts of concentrates have been developed that are that nutrients are more accessible. So there are a number of different things that have been, different technologies that have been utilized. To keep a feeding program close to the natural manner, what we need to do is, again, make sure that the horse is fed little and often. If we don't do that, you're going to end up with a problem with the gut function. That means the horse will end up having problems with its intestinal tract. So you could have things like gastric ulcers start. Laminitis is a problem. Colic is also a problem. Laminitis and colic are basically the number 1 and number 2 killers of horses. Azoturia, tying up, hindgut acidosis, lots of problems with horses related to the way we feed them and the way we house them. So if you want a very simple solution to making your horse more happy and more healthy, one of the best things that we can do is let the horse be as close to nature as possible. Turn it out in a field if possible. Make sure that field has lots of water available to the horse, but also lots of grass so that he can be eating continually throughout the day. Ad lib when he wants, and then your horse will probably be a lot more healthy in his intestinal tract. Okay, so that's it for this particular slideshow, and I'll join you soon for the next one.